My name is Evelyn Rowe, and what you're about to hear isn't just about a mother being left out. It's about the moment she decided to never let herself be erased again. That morning, I arrived at the airport with my heart racing and a coral dress I had bought just for this trip. It was bright, hopeful, a silent attempt to feel included, to show that I belonged. Brian, my oldest son, had promised, "It's going to be a family weekend, just us, Mom. You deserve to be there." And I believed him. I spent days picking out gifts, preparing my house to sit empty, arranging everything as if I were leaving a place where I was still wanted. Across the terminal, I spotted Brian with his wife, Soraya, and my 7-year-old grandson, Oliver. He was clutching a stuffed dinosaur. I gave a small, warm wave. Brian walked over to me. His steps were heavy, his eyes avoided mine. And when he stopped in front of me, the words came out cold, like he was reading them off a note. "Mom, you're not on the passenger list." I frowned, still trying to make sense of it. "What do you mean? The ticket?" "I got the email. You sent it yourself," I said, pulling out my phone from my purse. He sighed, adjusted the strap of his backpack, and muttered, "I canceled your reservation last night." My hands froze. The world around me kept moving, luggage rolling by, boarding calls echoing overhead, but inside me, everything stopped. "Lacey needed a break," he added. "We thought it would be good for her to get away." Lacey, Soraya's sister-in-law, a woman I had only seen twice at family gatherings, currently going through a divorce. And somehow she had taken what was meant to be mine, my seat on that flight, my place in the family. "And you thought it was okay to replace me?" My voice trembled but held its ground. Soraya stepped forward, dressed like she was ready for a photo shoot, sunglasses on, arms crossed. "Evelyn, we just thought it would be more comfortable for you to stay home. You have your garden, your books, and honestly, the pace of the trip might be too tiring." My eyes went to Oliver, who was looking at me with confusion. When did our affection become something rare? When did my presence turn into a burden? They turned and walked away. Just like that. No touch, no hug, not even a goodbye. I stood there, boarding pass still in hand, and the feeling of being cut out of something I helped build. It was like someone had erased my name from a photograph. But if you've ever felt that too, like you were slowly being erased without warning, like you didn't matter, then maybe this story is yours too. If this story has touched you in any way, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Sometimes strength begins with knowing you're not alone. And trust me, you are not. I don't remember moving. All I know is that somehow my feet carried me to a row of windows overlooking the runway. I leaned against the glass as if it could somehow hold together the pieces of my broken heart. Outside, planes taxied and roared into the sky. And there I was, left behind at the gate of my own life. Brian's words still echoed in my ears, like a sentence badly translated, completely detached from reality. Lacey needed a break. Sure, of course. And me? What did I need? Had anyone even asked? Or had I become just the convenient older woman, the one you can set aside with a sympathetic nod and a hollow smile? I must have stood there too long. A young airline attendant in a navy blue blazer with a silver-lettered name badge approached gently. "Ma'am, do you need help?" she asked kindly. I shook my head, forcing a weak smile. "No, sweetheart. Just a change of plans." She paused for a moment. Her eyes met mine with that uneasy spark of someone who recognizes pain but doesn't know how to touch it. "I understand. I hope you have a good day," she murmured before walking away. I sat down on one of the hard plastic chairs in the waiting area. The coral dress wrinkled under my weight, and at that moment, it almost mocked me. I ran my hand over my knees, trying to distract myself from the burning in my eyes, but I didn't cry. The tears came later. When I got home, the sun was already setting. The living room was dark and smelled faintly of stale lemon. Dampness crept into the corners. The windows were still closed, and the silence wrapped around me like a sheet far too cold. I dropped my purse to the floor and leaned back against the door, not even bothering to close it. I stood there, frozen. For a moment, I almost believed that if I just walked backward, everything else might unravel too. The pain, the humiliation, the absence. But what hurt the most wasn't the canceled trip. It was the fact that, to my own son, I had become optional. I knelt beside my still-packed suitcase, where the sunscreen lay beside a pair of flats and a small gift box for Oliver. Dinosaur stickers, a coloring book. My grandson. The only one who hesitated, glancing back as if something inside him already knew. Something wasn't right. I unzipped the suitcase, just to look, just to breathe among the neatly folded clothes. And right there, on the carpet of my living room, I broke down. Not with grace, like in some movie scene. It was an ugly cry, a deep, guttural sob that came from somewhere ancient, raw, uncontrolled, just pain. There was no one there to see me cry. And maybe that's why I let it all out like never before. But somewhere between the silence and the spasms of a grief too old to name, something began to shift. A flicker. A small, burning anger, not destructive, but alive. A voice inside me whispered, "Enough. Enough of being erased. Enough of asking for permission to exist." I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew, with raw, unshakable clarity, that I was done begging for space in the lives of those who placed me last. Because a woman who spent her life building bridges eventually learns she can cross them alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not that I really tried. I sat on the couch in my nightgown and socks, the kitchen light left on, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile silence that was holding me together. It felt like everything inside me had been put on pause, my thoughts, my wants, even my hunger. But sometimes, sleeplessness brings courage, or at least curiosity. Maybe it was just a reflex. Maybe it was the unconscious need to keep my hands busy with anything that didn't involve remembering. I went to the hallway closet, the old one with the stiff door and loose handle, and started digging through boxes of old things, wool coats I hadn't worn in years, folders filled with documents from when I still used checks. That's when my hand brushed against something metallic, small, solid. Daryl's gray box. Daryl was my husband for 31 years. He passed away 7 years ago after a long, quiet battle with cancer that changed him almost beyond recognition, except for his eyes. His eyes never changed. Before he died, he whispered something that came from deep inside him. "There are things I never told you, Eve, but someday you'll understand why." At the time, I chalked it up to the illness speaking. But now, holding that box, something inside me stirred in a way I hadn't felt in years. I set it on the kitchen table. My hands were trembling a little. I sat down. The silence was no longer dull. It was charged, alive. I remembered there was a key hidden in the back of the silverware drawer. I also remembered never asking what was inside. Daryl would always say, "Just old paperwork, not worth the mess." But I had to know. That box was calling to whatever part of me still remained. The key slid in with a soft click, and the lid opened easily. Inside was an envelope, thick, sealed, and on top of it, a photograph. Daryl, young, wearing a pilot's uniform, smiling wide, proud. I had never seen that photo before. I never even knew he wore that uniform. I picked up the envelope. On the back, a single line. "For Evelyn, only if she's alone." My eyes filled with tears, because I knew at that moment, more than ever, that yes, I was alone. And yet, maybe because of that, I deserved to know. I carefully broke the seal. "My Eve, if you're reading this, it means the time has come. And yes, you're alone. But that doesn't mean you're lost." The letter spoke of a company. A small executive aviation business Daryl had started decades ago before he met me. He had kept it a secret, grown it, nurtured it, and now he had left 51% of it to me. With contracts, legal documents, official records, it was all real. "You have wings, my love. You always have. Now it's time to remember how to fly." The paper shook in my hands, not from fear, but from awe. and a kind of joy that felt almost sacred. I had spent years being who others needed me to be, but now someone had laid out a future for me, in silence, with love, and that someone believed I was still capable of flight. I closed my eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and I knew, without a shred of doubt, I was going to accept that inheritance. Not just the business, but the chance to rediscover myself. I spent hours with those papers spread across the table, as if every line of the contracts was handing back a lost piece of myself. It felt surreal to see my name, Evelyn Rowe, listed as the majority owner of an airline I didn't even know existed. Stranger still was the feeling that, for the first time in years, I belonged to something without having to explain myself. Daryl, my late husband, had prepared everything, filed, sealed. He had trusted that one day I would need this, not out of ambition, but out of emotional survival. Among the documents, there was a note asking me to contact someone named Ray Donovan. I didn't know who he was, but at that point, his was the only name that made any sense to pursue. I called. The voice that answered on the other end was crisp, almost military. Horizon North, Ray Donovan. Ray, this is Evelyn Rowe. I was Daryl Rowe's wife. Silence. 1 second, 2. Mrs. Rowe, he said with composed reverence, we've been waiting for this moment for years. There was emotion in his voice, but also restraint. Ray didn't treat me like a widow. He spoke to me like a leader. We talked for nearly an hour. He brought me up to speed. The fleet of executive jets, the flight schedules, the contracts with VIP clients. When I mentioned the name of the city, Clearwater, the destination of the trip my family had taken without me, he paused for a moment and said, coincidentally, we have a flight to Clearwater tomorrow at noon, high-profile client, but we can add you to the manifest. The jet is yours. I took a deep breath. Whether it was chance, fate, or something greater, whatever force was at work, it felt like I was being given back what had been taken from me. Put my name on the list, Ray, first class, and please, no announcement, total discretion. Understood. It'll be handled under owner protocol. I hung up and walked back to the hallway closet. The same coral dress still hung there, smooth and waiting, for a different day. And that new day was finally on its way. The next morning, I let myself sleep in. I had my coffee in silence, staring out at the backyard still damp with dew. After so many years rushing to please others, it felt almost strange to move at my own pace. I arrived at Horizon North's private terminal at 11:45 a.m., carrying my blue suitcase and wearing a white scarf over my hair. A security guard greeted me with respectful formality. Good morning, Mrs. Rowe. The crew is ready for you. My bag was taken discreetly. No lines, no explanations. Just polite gestures and quiet respect. It was the first time in a long while that my name was remembered without hesitation. The flight was calm, quiet, almost therapeutic. When the plane touched down in Clearwater, a driver was waiting on the tarmac beside a sleek black car with Horizon North's logo printed discreetly on the side. From the moment I stepped inside, everything felt orchestrated to restore dignity to someone who, just yesterday, had been forgotten. At the resort, I was welcomed with champagne, a chilled towel, and a suite overlooking the ocean. The concierge smiled warmly. Welcome, Mrs. Rowe. Your reservation includes a massage, private dinner, and full access to all facilities. Everything is ready for you. I went up, set my suitcase on the beige linen armchair, and opened the terrace doors. The ocean breeze hit me, full of salt and freedom. For a moment, I thought about sitting down and simply enjoying the view. But then I saw them. Far off on the central deck of the resort stood Soraya, in a floral dress looking uneasy, as she spoke with Brian, who was scanning the area nervously. They saw me. First, Soraya. Her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost in low heels. Then Brian, who stepped forward uncertainly, unsure whether to approach or hide behind the nearest palm tree. I walked down slowly. No rush. Each step gave me back what had once been taken. My own story. Mom, Brian said, like he didn't trust what he was seeing. Evelyn, Soraya added, tense with an awkward smile. You came? I did. For myself. On my own jet. They both went pale. And for a moment, the only sound I heard was the crashing of the waves. Soraya nervously tucked her hair behind her ear. Brian tried to speak. We probably could have planned this better. Oh, you planned it just fine, I replied calmly. You just forgot about me. And I turned around. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I simply walked away. Because the most important reunion had already happened. The one I had with myself. I returned to my suite as if I were stepping into something sacred. I closed the door gently. What I felt wasn't anger. It was clarity. And that clarity was more powerful than any outburst or explanation. I gave myself time, took off my shoes, washed my face, tied my hair up with a scarf, and walked out to the balcony. The sea was there, blue and relentless. And for the first time in years, it didn't remind me of everything I had lost. It felt like it was mine. That afternoon, I declined calls, ignored notifications, and switched my phone to airplane mode. I asked the front desk for just one thing, a cup of lemon tea and a brand new notebook. The concierge brought it up with a warm smile. Is there anything else I can get for you, Mrs. Rowe? Yes, I replied, meeting his eyes with kindness. I'd like to begin again. That same evening, I joined a video meeting with Horizon North's senior team. Ray had arranged everything. Evelyn, do you just want to be kept in the loop? Ray asked. Or do you plan to take an active role? I plan to lead, I answered without hesitation. They hadn't expected that, and neither had I. I spent the week balancing meetings, long walks on the beach, and spiraling thoughts. Each day, I felt more at home in my own skin. I smiled without worrying who might be watching. I slept in. And I wrote. A lot. One afternoon, I noticed an older woman, maybe just a few years ahead of me, cleaning the restrooms near the massage cabanas. She stood tall, her eyes sharp. Even with wet hands and a tired face, there was a quiet dignity about her, a strength that moved me deeply. And in that instant, an idea came to me, a purpose. The next morning, I called Ray. I want to create a fund, I told him, for women over 60 who want to work in hospitality or aviation, who want to start over. Change direction, have a choice. There was a pause on the other end. That's incredible, he said. We can frame this within the company's ESG initiatives. Do you want it to carry your name? Yes, I do. But not to be honored, just to set an example. Over the next few days, I drafted the proposal. Slowly, with intuition, with a passion I thought I had lost. I named it Late Wings, because that's what I wanted to give. Wings to those who thought it was too late to fly. And while I worked on the fund, I called a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. Indora. Fierce, sarcastic, loyal. She answered on the first ring. Evelyn Rowe, I thought they buried you under Brian's begonias. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time, without pain. I'm done watering anyone else's garden, Indora. From now on, I'm only tending to mine. She let out a delighted cackle. You still got that red suitcase? I do. Then pack it. We leave Tuesday. My heart fluttered in a way it hadn't in years, like a door had opened inside my chest, traveling without asking for permission, without leaving instructions, without needing to be useful, just being. The night before our trip, I sat on the resort balcony with my new notebook in my lap. I wrote, maybe the world hasn't changed, but I have. And now, the world will just have to deal with it. On the morning of our trip, I woke up before the alarm. Not out of obligation, but out of pure excitement. A feeling I hadn't known in, I don't even know how long. It was a mix of childlike curiosity and the peace that comes from no longer needing to prove anything to anyone. I wore comfortable jeans, a white blouse, and tied my hair back with the same scarf I wore at the resort. I brought the red suitcase that had spent years tucked away in the closet. Now, it felt meaningful, a symbol of everything I was finally ready to live. We met at the Burlington, Vermont airport, where Indora had suggested our adventure begin. First stop, BMF, she said with a mischievous grin. We'll take a ski lift, drink awful whiskey, and pretend we know something about extreme sports. I laughed, loudly, without shame. And that's exactly what we did. At the top of the mountain, we drank pine-flavored whiskey, laughed until our stomachs ached, and told old stories. No filters, no rush. Then we went to Sicily. Got lost on purpose in an olive grove. Flirted with two linen-shirted men who were more interested in telling jokes than impressing us. And for the first time, I felt free to look someone in the eye without carrying the weight of my past on my shoulders. "You know what I like about you now, Evelyn?" Endora asked one night as she lay in a hammock on the balcony. "What?" "You're taking up space, without asking permission." I didn't answer. I just smiled. We kept going. In Kyoto, we sat beneath blooming cherry trees and made a toast over hot tea to never again apologizing for being intense or deep or too much, because all of that is beauty too. We took photos we never posted, slept in late, ate dessert before dinner, and started calling ourselves the Silver Wings, an inside joke about our gray hair and newfound freedoms. In every city, I scribbled down a little memory in my notebook. The warmth of the sun on my skin during breakfast in Palermo. The soft sound of Endora snoring on an overnight train. The gaze of an older hotel worker who thanked me for simply listening, because no one there knew her name. Between layovers, I dove deeper into the Late Wings project. I emailed Ray, worked through legal structures, and collected testimonies from women like me, women who had been set aside, who were told their time had passed, but who still craved more from life. I created a mission, to make space for those who had been quietly made small. And with that, something profound clicked inside me. It wasn't about proving to the world that I was still alive. It was about feeling alive, without needing the world's approval. On the last night of our journey, we sat on a wooden pier in Key West, watching the sunset like two old free girls. Endora touched my arm. "You know what makes me proudest, Evelyn?" "What?" "That you didn't wait for anyone to invite you. You threw your own party, and now you're out there dancing." I closed my eyes and let the breeze pass through me. That was it. For the first time in my life, I was home. Inside myself. 6 months had passed since that flight to Clearwater. 6 months with no real messages from Brian, just a few automated emails, birthday cards, photos of Oliver at school, vague invitations to events that felt more like obligations than gestures of love. No apology. No real explanation. And that was okay. By now, I had learned that the most powerful kind of reconciliation doesn't happen with others. It happens within ourselves. And honestly, I had forgiven myself for trying so hard, for shrinking, staying quiet, bending over backwards, all to keep a place at a table where my chair had already been pulled away. But now I had built my own table. Then one evening, out of nowhere, came a dinner invitation. From him, Brian. A fancy restaurant, dim lighting, linen napkins, the kind of place that tries to dress up discomfort with polished silverware. He stood when he saw me, still with that cautious air of someone who doesn't quite know where he stands. "You look great, Mom," he said, as if a compliment could erase everything. I sat, let him talk, ordered a cup of tea, listened as he stumbled through excuses even he didn't seem to believe. It wasn't personal. Lacey, she was going through a divorce. It all happened so fast. "And you thought I was disposable," I finished, softly but firmly. He swallowed hard, guilt swirling in the glass of water he kept turning between his fingers. "You'll always be my mother. But I'm not your maid," I said, holding his gaze. "I'm not your plant to water. I'm not your silence to keep." The waiter brought the check. Brian hesitated, but I was quicker. "I've paid enough," I said, sliding my card onto the tray. "This one's just a souvenir." We stepped out of the restaurant. He hugged me, more out of regret than love, and I let him. Not because I needed it, but because it didn't hurt anymore. Outside, a black car waited, discreet but with Horizon North's emblem gleaming in the streetlight. I got in without looking back. The next day, I flew to Santa Fe. I had a meeting about expanding the Late Wings Fund, and a personal commitment too. A local TV interview about my story. On the plane, I took seat 1A. The flight attendant smiled warmly when she saw me. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Rowe," she said, placing a porcelain cup of chamomile tea on my tray, without me even asking. As the plane taxied down the runway, I opened my travel journal. On the page, I wrote, "My son tried to make me feel small, but without knowing, he gave me the push I needed to grow." I closed the notebook gently, took a deep breath, and looked out the window. The sky was clear, the world vast, and inside me there was no fear left, only space. Space for me. Space for someone who will never again ask for permission to exist. If this story spoke to you, if at any point you saw yourself in Evelyn's pain or her courage, then from my heart, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. It's the simplest and most powerful way we can stay connected, sharing stories that inspire, heal, and set us free. Like, share, and remember, there is life after abandonment. And sometimes what looks like the end is just the beginning of who you were born to become.